In the quiet, dusty town of Marua, nestled along the winding banks of the Tabe River, where the sun kissed the earth with an almost unbearable heat, there lived a girl named Bina. At just 12 years old, Bina had learned the harshness of life far beyond her years. She was a thin, fragile-looking child with eyes that seemed too large for her small face, eyes that spoke of dreams buried beneath layers of pain and longing. Bina's mother had passed away when she was only 5. Her father, a struggling fisherman, unable to care for her and her younger brother, had sent them to live with his elder sister, Auntie Risi. Auntie Risi was known throughout Marua for her sharp tongue and an even sharper temper. People in the town whispered about her, calling her Iron Hand, a name that suited her perfectly. From the moment Bina and her brother arrived at Auntie Risi's house, it was clear they were not welcome. Auntie Risi treated them as though they were nothing more than a burden. Every morning, long before the first rooster crowed, Bina was up, scrubbing the floors, fetching water from the river, and sweeping the compound. Auntie Risi would watch her with cold, unblinking eyes, always finding fault in her work. "Is this how your mother raised you?" Auntie Risi would bark, snapping a thin cane against the wall. "You useless girl, if you don't work faster, you'll sleep outside tonight." Despite the bruises on her hands and the ache in her small body, Bina never complained. She endured it all silently, her only comfort being the thought of her brother, Timmy. Timmy, just 8 years old, was her world. She shielded him from Auntie Risi's wrath, taking on extra chores and hiding him away whenever their aunt's anger flared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of red and gold, Bina stood by the river, washing a pile of clothes. The water felt cool against her hands, soothing the burns from the hot oil Auntie Risi had accidentally spilled on her earlier that day. Or perhaps it wasn't an accident, Bina couldn't tell anymore. As she scrubbed, she whispered softly to the river, telling it her dreams, her fears, and her longing for a life free of pain. "I wish I could be a bird," she murmured, watching a kingfisher dart across the water. "I'd fly far, far away from here." The river, silent and steady, offered no reply. One day, something unexpected happened. Auntie Risi's husband, Uncle Seo, who had always been away on business trips, returned home unannounced. He was a tall, imposing man with kind eyes, a stark contrast to his wife. The moment he stepped into the house, the atmosphere seemed to shift. Uncle Seo noticed the way Bina flinched whenever Auntie Risi called her name. He saw the faint scars on her arms and the sadness in her eyes. "Risi," he said one night, his voice calm but firm, "why does that girl look so frightened?" "She's just a child." "She's lazy and ungrateful," Auntie Risi replied, her voice dripping with disdain. "If I don't discipline her, who will?" Uncle Seo didn't respond, but his gaze lingered on Bina. The next morning, he called her into his room. Bina entered hesitantly, clutching her faded dress, her heart pounding in her chest. "Bina," he said gently, "is everything okay? Are you happy here?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. She looked down, afraid to speak, afraid that if she did, Auntie Risi would find out and punish her. But Uncle Seo's kind eyes encouraged her. I just want Timmy to be safe," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Uncle Seo placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, my child. Everything will be fine." That evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Uncle Seo made an announcement that sent a ripple of shock through the room. "I've decided that Bina and Timmy will come to the city with me. They deserve a better life." Auntie Risi's spoon clattered onto her plate. "What? Are you out of your mind, Seo? Those children are my responsibility." "Clearly, you don't treat them like they are," he replied coolly. "I've seen enough, Risi." Bina's heart raced. Was this the escape she had prayed for? Could this be real? But Auntie Risi wasn't one to give up so easily. The look in her eyes promised trouble, and Bina knew that the battle was far from over. The next few days were tense. Auntie Risi's house was filled with her sharp, angry words and cold glares aimed at Bina. She spoke less to Uncle Seo, and her disdain was clear every time she saw Bina. Timmy clung tightly to his sister, sensing the storm brewing around them. One evening, as Bina sat by the dim light of a flickering oil lamp, Auntie Risi approached her silently. The air was heavy with unspoken threats. Bina didn't move, her heart beating faster with every step the woman took. "I'll let you go," Auntie Risi finally said, her voice cold and measured. "But don't think for one second you have an easy life. Out there, it's worse. You'll see." Bina said nothing. She knew Auntie Risi's words were meant to scare her, but they couldn't scare her more than the life she was already living. All she wanted was to protect Timmy, and if living meant freedom for both of them, she would endure whatever came next. The night before their departure, Uncle Seo helped Bina pack a small bundle of their belongings, a few worn clothes, a tiny charm necklace their mother had given her, and a picture of her family by the river. Timmy held onto a small, torn book that had been his only source of comfort during the long days. Early the next morning, the first light of dawn peeked through the cracks in the wooden door. Bina and Timmy stood by the riverbank, their small forms illuminated by the soft golden hues of the sunrise. Uncle Seo watched from a distance, his presence a silent promise of protection. As they boarded the boat to the city, Auntie Risi stood on the shore, her face twisted in a scowl. "Don't expect me to forget this," she hissed through clenched teeth. "You'll regret this day, Bina. Mark my words." But Bina didn't look back. She held Timmy tightly, their hands intertwined, feeling the pulse of the river beneath them as they drifted further away from the pain of Marua. The city lay ahead, a new beginning waiting to be written. In the distance, the sun rose higher, casting its warmth over the waters, and for the first time in years, Bina felt hope. Days turned into weeks as Bina and Timmy settled into their new life in the bustling city. The streets were noisy, filled with unfamiliar sights and sounds, market stalls piled high with colorful fruits, people moving quickly with purposeful strides, and the hum of city life humming in the background. Uncle Seo's home wasn't grand, but it was a far cry from the cold, harsh environment they had fled. They lived modestly, with a small room that offered just enough space for the three of them. But for Bina, it felt like a palace compared to Auntie Risi's oppressive house. The city offered more than just freedom, it brought opportunities. Bina's days were now filled with attending school alongside other children her age. She couldn't believe it at first, actual lessons, laughter in the schoolyard, and teachers who smiled and encouraged her to ask questions. It was as though the weight that had been crushing her spirit was slowly lifting. However, the shadow of their past was never far away. One evening, as Bina helped Uncle Seo prepare dinner, she noticed a letter lying on the kitchen table. Its contents were brief but chilling. Asterisk, "You'll regret taking them. Bina belongs to me." Asterisk. Bina's hands trembled as she handed the letter to Uncle Seo. His face hardened as he read the words. "We won't let her harm you again," Uncle Seo said firmly. "You're safe now." But Bina knew safety was fragile. Memories of the past haunted her, and each day brought the fear that Auntie Risi wouldn't give up easily. Still, despite the unease, there was something new blossoming inside her, courage. At school, Bina made friends, a group of girls her age who welcomed her with open arms. They shared stories about their families, dreams for the future, and the joy of simple things like skipping stones by the river. Bina listened, absorbing their words with gratitude. For the first time, she began to dream of a future where she wouldn't just survive, but thrive. One afternoon, as they walked home from school, Timmy clutched Bina's hand tightly, his voice a soft whisper. "Bina, will Auntie Risi find us?" Bina squeezed his hand gently, smiling down at her little brother. No, Timmy. We are too far from her now. But deep down, she knew that the danger wasn't over. Auntie Rissy's threats hung over them like a dark cloud, threatening to cast a shadow on their newfound peace. Weeks later, life in the city seemed to settle into a comfortable rhythm. Bina and Timmy were beginning to feel the steady pull of hope. Uncle Seo enrolled Bina in extra evening lessons at a local learning center, where she was quickly noticed for her intelligence and determination. She became the kind of girl her teachers whispered about in admiration, a shining star despite the odds. But trouble stirred on the horizon. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the crowded rooftops, painting the streets in hues of orange and gray, a knock came at the door. Uncle Seo opened it cautiously. Standing there was a man Bina had never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, and stern-faced. He carried himself with an air of authority. "Good evening," the man began. "I'm Inspector Whale from the local police station. May I come in?" Uncle Seo stepped aside, his calm demeanor masking his concern. Bina and Timmy huddled in a corner of the room, their eyes wide with fear. The man's voice was firm yet kind as he explained the purpose of his visit. "We received a report," he said, glancing at Bina. "Someone from Marua claims these children have been unlawfully taken from their guardian. A woman named Rissy." Bina felt the blood drain from her face. Auntie Rissy had found them. "She's lying," Uncle Seo said firmly, standing protectively in front of the children. "I am their uncle. Those children were suffering in her care. I brought them here to give them a better life." The inspector nodded slowly, taking notes. "I understand, sir, but we need to investigate this claim. The woman has filed a petition stating her rights as their legal guardian." Tears welled in Bina's eyes as Timmy clung to her arm. "Please," she whispered, "don't let her take us back." Uncle Seo placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No one is taking you anywhere," he said firmly. Turning to Inspector Whale, he added, "If it's an investigation you need, then conduct it. I have nothing to hide." Over the following days, Inspector Whale delved into the matter. He visited Marua, speaking with neighbors and community members who had witnessed Auntie Rissy's treatment of the children. The stories they told were damning. "She worked that girl like a slave," one elderly woman said, shaking her head in disapproval. "And the boy? He was so scared he wouldn't speak unless Bina was there." Others echoed similar sentiments, painting a picture of cruelty that shocked even the seasoned inspector. Meanwhile, in the city, Bina couldn't shake the fear that Auntie Rissy might still find a way to win. One night, as she lay awake listening to Timmy's soft breathing, she whispered a prayer, a plea for strength, for protection, and for justice. Then came the day of reckoning. Inspector Whale returned with news that sent ripples through their small home. "Rissy's claim has been dismissed," he said, his voice steady. "The evidence against her is overwhelming. The court has ruled in your favor, Mr. Seo. The children will remain with you." Bina's knees buckled, and tears streamed down her face. Timmy hugged her tightly, his small arms wrapped around her like a lifeline. For the first time in what felt like forever, the heavy weight of fear lifted from her heart. But just as they began to celebrate this hard-won victory, a letter arrived, a letter from Marua that would change everything. Auntie Rissy wasn't finished, and what she had planned next was far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The letter arrived wrapped in an ordinary brown envelope, but its contents sent chills down Uncle Seo's spine. It was short, written in Auntie Rissy's scrawling handwriting. "Asterisk, you think you've won, but you haven't seen the last of me. Watch your back. Asterisk." Uncle Seo clenched the paper in his fist, his jaw tightening. He turned to Bina and Timmy, who sat nearby, oblivious to the storm brewing once again. His protective instinct flared. Auntie Rissy's persistence was turning into something dangerous, something that could no longer be ignored. That night, as Bina helped Timmy with his schoolwork, she noticed Uncle Seo pacing the living room, the lines on his face deeper than usual. She hesitated before speaking, her voice soft. "Uncle Seo, is everything okay?" He paused, looking at her with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're very brave, Bina," he said finally, sitting beside her. "But sometimes bravery isn't enough. I need to make sure you and Timmy are truly safe." The following morning, Uncle Seo made arrangements to take further precautions. He reached out to a lawyer who specialized in child welfare cases and ensured that all necessary documents were filed to solidify his custody of the children. He also reported the threatening letter to the local police, who promised to monitor the situation closely. Despite these efforts, a sense of unease lingered. Auntie Rissy had always been resourceful, and her ability to manipulate situations was well known in Marua. Days passed without any sign of her, but the silence only deepened the tension. One evening, as Bina and Timmy walked home from school, they noticed a woman standing near the apartment building. She was dressed in a bright Ankara wrapper, her headscarf tied neatly, and her face partially hidden by the setting sun's glare. Bina's heart stopped as recognition hit her like a thunderbolt. It was Auntie Rissy. "Timmy, run," she whispered, grabbing her brother's hand and darting into a nearby alley. They weaved through narrow streets, their breaths coming in sharp gasps. Bina's mind raced. Why was Auntie Rissy here? How had she found them? The sound of footsteps behind them quickened. Bina turned to look and saw two men, their faces unfamiliar, pursuing them. Fear gripped her, but she tightened her hold on Timmy, urging him to run faster. They finally reached a crowded marketplace, where the chatter of vendors and the clatter of goods provided a momentary shield. Bina ducked into a small kiosk, pulling Timmy close and crouching behind stacks of yam. Her heart pounded in her chest as she listened for their pursuers. Minutes felt like hours before she peeked out cautiously. The men were gone. Still, she didn't dare leave the market until the sun had set completely. When they finally returned home, shaken but unharmed, Bina told Uncle Seo everything. "This has gone too far," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "If Rissy thinks she can intimidate us, she's wrong." That night, Uncle Seo called a trusted friend who worked as a private investigator. The man, a quiet but determined individual named Mr. Tond, agreed to help. Within days, Mr. Tond uncovered shocking information. Auntie Rissy had paid the men to follow Bina and Timmy, hoping to scare them into returning to her. "She won't stop," Mr. Tond warned. "But she's making mistakes. If we gather enough evidence, we can ensure she faces consequences." As the pieces of Auntie Rissy's scheme came to light, Bina found herself at a crossroads. For years, she had endured in silence, but now, she realized that her silence had given Auntie Rissy power. It was time to fight back, not just for herself, but for Timmy and for the life they were trying to build. The days that followed brought a new resolve to their little family. Uncle Seo worked closely with Mr. Tond and the police, gathering every piece of evidence against Auntie Rissy. At the same time, Bina began to tell her story, first to her friends at school, then to her teachers. Her bravery inspired those around her, and soon, a community of support began to form. But Auntie Rissy wasn't done yet. Her next move was one that no one could have anticipated, a desperate act that would force Bina and her family to face their greatest challenge yet. It was a quiet Saturday morning when Auntie Rissy made her boldest move yet. The air was cool, and the streets around Uncle Seo's home were unusually still. Bina was helping Timmy with his reading while Uncle Seo prepared breakfast in the kitchen. The aroma of fried plantains filled the air, creating a rare moment of peace. Then, there was a loud bang on the front door. Uncle Seo frowned, wiping his hands on a towel as he approached the door. "Who is it?" he called out. There was no answer, just another loud knock, this time more insistent. Bina stood frozen, clutching Timmy's arm. Something about the sound made her uneasy. When Uncle Seo opened the door, he was greeted by 3 uniformed police officers, their expressions grim. Behind them stood Auntie Risi, dressed in a flowing wrapper and matching headscarf, her face set in a look of triumphant smugness. "Mr. Seo," the officer in charge began, "we have a warrant to search your house and take custody of the children. This woman claims they are being held here against their will." Uncle Seo's face darkened. "This is absurd. Those children were rescued from her abuse. I have all the documents proving my custody." But Auntie Risi, ever the manipulator, stepped forward. "Lies. Lies, I tell you," she cried, her voice quivering with exaggerated emotion. "These children are my blood. They belong to me. He stole them from my house and brought them to this city." Timmy started to cry, clutching Bina's waist. Bina stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "That's not true. She's the one who hurt us. She made me work like a slave and treated us like we didn't matter." The officers exchanged glances, clearly conflicted. One of them pulled out a folder Uncle Seo had provided earlier, containing the legal documents. "We see your claims, sir," the officer said cautiously. "But this warrant is valid. We'll need to take the children temporarily until this matter is resolved in court." "No." Uncle Seo's voice thundered. "You cannot take them. They've been through enough." But the officers moved forward, their duty bound by the warrant. Bina clung to Timmy, her tears flowing freely. "Please don't take us back to her," she begged, her voice breaking. "She'll hurt us again." Despite their pleas, the officers escorted Bina and Timmy outside. Auntie Risi grabbed Timmy's arm roughly, pulling him toward her with a smirk. "You think you can escape me?" she hissed under her breath. "You're mine." Bina's cries echoed in the hallway as Uncle Seo argued vehemently with the officers, to no avail. They were taken to a temporary shelter under the supervision of social services while the case was reviewed. The days that followed were some of the darkest Bina had ever known. The shelter was clean and staffed by kind workers, but the fear of being returned to Auntie Risi loomed over her like a shadow. Timmy barely spoke, his small frame trembling every time the thought of Auntie Risi crossed his mind. But even in the darkness, a glimmer of hope appeared. Uncle Seo, determined to rescue them, partnered with Mr. Tond and a group of advocates who specialized in child welfare. They worked tirelessly, gathering more evidence and rallying public support. Uncle Seo contacted local journalists, and soon, Bina's story began to spread. The truth about Auntie Risi's cruelty, combined with testimonies from neighbors in Marua, painted a damning picture. The media coverage brought attention from higher authorities, and the public outcry grew louder. People from all walks of life called for justice, demanding that the children's voices be heard. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. Bina stood in the courtroom, her small frame dwarfed by the imposing walls and rows of stern-looking adults. She was nervous, but as she looked around and saw Uncle Seo's encouraging smile, she felt a surge of strength. When the judge asked her to speak, Bina took a deep breath. "I just want a chance to live," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Auntie Risi hurt us. She made me do things no child should have to do. Uncle Seo saved us. Please, don't send us back to her." The courtroom was silent as her words hung in the air. Auntie Risi sat stiffly, her composure slipping for the first time. Her carefully constructed lies were crumbling under the weight of the truth. After hours of deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict. Full custody of Bina and Timmy was granted to Uncle Seo. Auntie Risi was to face charges of child abuse and endangerment. As the gavel struck, signaling the end of the trial, Bina felt a wave of relief so powerful it left her trembling. She turned to Uncle Seo, who who enveloped her in a warm, protective hug. "You're safe now," he whispered. "No one will hurt you again." For the first time, Bina believed it. Life after the trial wasn't perfect, but it was filled with hope, a rare, precious thing Bina had almost forgotten could exist. The world no longer felt like a place of endless suffering. Instead, it was a canvas of possibilities. Uncle Seo worked tirelessly to ensure Bina and Timmy felt secure in their new life. Their small home became a sanctuary of laughter, learning, and love. Bina flourished in school, her determination earning her a scholarship to one of the best secondary schools in the city. Timmy, inspired by his sister's resilience, began to find his voice, his once muted laughter now ringing through their home. But the scars of the past hadn't faded completely. Nightmares would occasionally wake Bina in the middle of the night, her heart racing as visions of Auntie Reese's cruelty replayed in her mind. During those moments, Uncle Seo would sit by her side, offering quiet reassurance until she fell asleep again. One day, a surprise visitor arrived at their door. It was Inspector Whale, the officer who had once knocked on their door with a warrant in hand. This time, he came bearing unexpected news. "Auntie Reese has been sentenced to 10 years in prison," he said. "The evidence against her was overwhelming. She won't be able to harm anyone for a long time." Bina's hands trembled as she processed his words. A part of her wanted to rejoice, but another part felt a strange emptiness. Auntie Reese had caused her unimaginable pain, yet she was still family, a complicated, painful truth she would carry forever. "Thank you," Uncle Seo said, his voice firm. "For everything." Inspector Whale nodded. "Bina," he added, turning to her, "you're one of the bravest children I've ever met. Don't ever forget that." His words stayed with her, a quiet source of strength as she continued to build her life. Months turned into years, and the shadows of Marua began to recede. Bina excelled in her studies, eventually earning a spot in a university to study law. Her experience had sparked a fire within her, a desire to fight for children who, like her, had been voiceless and forgotten. Timmy grew into a cheerful, confident young boy, his laughter a reminder of how far they had come. He dreamed of becoming a doctor, inspired by the kindness of a nurse who had once treated him when he was sick. As they sat together one evening, watching the sunset from their modest balcony, Bina turned to Uncle Seo. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For saving us." Uncle Seo smiled, his eyes glistening. "You saved yourselves, Bina. I just gave you a chance to show the world how strong you are." In that moment, Bina realized that her story wasn't just one of survival, it was a story of triumph, of resilience, and of the unbreakable bonds of family. The girl who had once been seen as nothing more than a burden was now a beacon of hope, proving that even the darkest nights could give way to a brighter dawn. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she faced the future with unwavering courage, knowing that she had the strength to overcome anything. Years passed, and the dust of Bina and Timmy's turbulent childhood began to settle. Life had transformed in ways neither of them could have imagined. The little girl who once toiled under Auntie Reese's harsh rule in Marua was now a confident young woman, standing tall as a newly graduated lawyer. Bina's resolve to fight for justice had become her life's mission. Timmy, now a bright and cheerful teenager, was thriving in secondary school. His laughter echoed through their home, a sound that never failed to bring a smile to Uncle Seo's face. The family that had once been broken was now whole, their bonds stronger than ever. One rainy afternoon, as the droplets tapped gently against the window panes, a letter arrived. It bore the official seal of the Nigerian judiciary. Uncle Seo opened it carefully, his brow furrowing as he read the contents. When he looked up, his face carried a mixture of surprise and pride. "Bina," he said, handing her the letter. "You've been invited to a special court session. They are recognizing your case as a landmark in child welfare advocacy. Bina's hands trembled as she read the letter. Memories of the courtroom where she had once fought for her freedom flooded her mind. This invitation wasn't just about recognition, it was a chance to close the chapter on her past and inspire others to stand up for what was right. The day of the court session arrived. Bina stood in the same courtroom where her voice had once cracked under the weight of fear. This time, she stood as a symbol of hope, her head held high. The judge, now retired but invited to preside over the ceremony, addressed the audience. Today, we honor not just a case, but a story of resilience, justice, and the courage of a young girl who refused to be silenced. Bina was called to speak. She walked to the podium, her step steady. The room fell silent as she began. I stand here today not because I am special, but because I was given a chance to be heard. My story is not just mine, it belongs to every child who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unloved. If my journey teaches us anything, it's that no child is beyond hope and no darkness is too deep to overcome. Her words moved the audience to tears. Among them were social workers, advocates, and children who had found strength in her story. Even Uncle Seo, a man rarely given to outward emotion, wiped his eyes discreetly. But there was one person in the courtroom whose presence was unexpected, Auntie Risi. Released early for good behavior, Risi sat quietly in the back row, her face unreadable. When the session ended, she approached Bina. Timmy and Uncle Seo moved protectively to her side, but Bina held up a hand. I'm not here to cause trouble, Auntie Risi said, her voice subdued. I came to say I'm sorry. The words hung in the air, heavy with years of pain and regret. Bina studied her, searching for sincerity. Auntie Risi looked older, her once piercing gaze softened by time and remorse. I don't expect forgiveness, Risi continued, her voice trembling. I've made mistakes I can never undo. But seeing you today, I wanted you to know that I'm proud of what you've become. Bina took a deep breath. The wounds Risi had caused would never fully heal, but holding on to bitterness would only weigh her down. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said honestly. But I can choose to let go of the hate. Risi nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered before turning to leave. As Bina watched her go, she felt an unexpected lightness. She had faced the demons of her past and emerged stronger, her heart no longer bound by fear or anger. In the weeks that followed, Bina's story continued to inspire change. Laws were reviewed, policies reformed, and awareness campaigns launched to protect vulnerable children across Nigeria. Her name became synonymous with hope, a testament to the power of resilience. Back at home, life resumed its comforting rhythm. One evening, as the family sat together on their balcony, watching the sunset, Bina turned to Uncle Seo. We've come so far, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Uncle Seo smiled, his eyes glistening in the fading light. Yes, we have. And the journey isn't over yet. Bina nodded, her heart full. The girl who had once been broken was now whole, her life a testament to the triumph of love, hope, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Bina felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She had endured. She had overcome. And now, she was free.